Yeah. Might be worth mentioning now that in spite of my best efforts, I wasn't able to cover up all of the red in this particular story, so viewer discretion is advised and all that.
Still, in the spirit of the Halloween season, I'm seeing this review through to the end.
And in spite of the low view counts, yet again, I will still try and make videos like this for every Halloween, so here's hoping you either had or will have a happy Halloween, and let's wrap up this story about a little bus stop that should probably be removed from every guidebook, if at all possible.
When we left off last time, a very nosy, douchey reporter,
So really, your everyday reporter,
had driven a construction worker into a light Yagami-style panic complete with synchronized swimming.
I just love the fact that I could do recaps like this.
Anyway, still in shock over having exposed his witnessing the deaths of his co-workers, Yoshimura decided to open up a few more of Arakawa's old wounds, going all the way back to his primary school days. Back in the good old days when all the kids were wearing those creepy as all hell G1 Higurashi masks.
Seriously, to the guy who originally came up with the concept of the Kigurumi mask, you, sir, are a true master of horror.
Creepy masks aside, the real trauma from Arakawa's past was his classmates seeing him take a number 2 in the grass after he couldn't get to a bathroom quick enough. And as Jet Black put it,
"There's nothing more pure and cruel as a child."
They all made fun of the poor kid, even giving him a degrading nickname. He held a grudge against all of them, especially the girl who gave him the nickname. Thus, he took out his frustrations in the worst way possible.
Again, I can't show much here, and again, I really don't want to show a kid being another kid with a broom, so let's just leave it at that.
And even more unfortunately for young Arakawa, his teacher was absolutely terrible and deserved to have a plate of cookies put in front of her. Like, seriously, even for this manga, this was a bit overkill. Life didn't get much better for Arakawa through the years, as his reputation followed him into middle school, and in spite of moving to a new town for high school, a familiar-looking Keiichi mask boy just so happened to attend the same school.
Miyuki Hoshizora on Friday the 13th doesn't have as much bad luck as you, kid.
Understandably left erect after being forced to recollect a childhood worse than 1,000 Charlie Browns, he rightfully tried to shut up the reporter who continued to stir the pot. As he did, some dark feelings within Arakawa began to surface, to the point he wanted to outright kill all the kids who made fun of him. Thus, he decided to turn to a power. Yoshimura then offered to introduce him to the deity.
By any chance, did he also have to raise up his index finger and go,
And when you meet with vindictive gods, things often don't work in your favor.
Man! The gods stink!
The rest of the bus stop crew returned to find one more to add to the kill count. Though, for whatever reason, Tonegawa didn't get the message. Arakawa, are you okay?
Do I look okay to you, dude?
Naturally, everyone suspected Yoshimura of foul play, with Rika in particular going on the offensive.
Honestly, I just wish I had the opportunity to say at least half of this stuff to ANN.
However, in spite of giving him an epic dressing down, complete with a glare that could shatter glass, Takano, out of nowhere, just called Rika away.
Jeez, as a teenager, you'd think she'd learn by now.
So, yet again, Mion was left alone with this guy, and pretty much continued Rika's line of questioning. He did seem to be regretful of his actions at first, but after Mion suffered yet another migraine attack, that was his signal to begin laughing evilly and ask Mion who he was.
Ah, darn, I didn't stay for this part of the quiz. I'm sorry, sir. Could you just give us the answer with the most over-the-top expression possible? Thank you.
Yep, the dude went into full-on Saturday morning supervillain mode, and as his first act of supervillainy, he played the I'm not touching you game?
Well, if it worked in Suicide Squad, I guess it could work here.
Actually, it kind of did, as after some invisible hand seemed to grasp at her throat, Yoshimura fully unleashed a ham, while also seeming to be possessed by the spiral curse.
Uzumaki and Higurashi. Someone make that crossover happen.
He admitted to killing Arakawa as well as being the serial killer they were looking for. And his motivation seemed to be that he was a vindictive messenger of Oyashiro-sama, and his next target was a disloyal follower. After getting her to fully pledge her allegiance to her hometown, he seemed to let Mion off the hook. However, before she could fully regain the blessings of Oyashiro-sama, they need to remove some sort of filth within her stomach. No, actually, he said it was the physical manifestation of her disloyalty to the village. Mion agreed to let him remove it, but the process wasn't pleasant, and again, something I can't really show, as I'm pretty sure this is only in the wheelhouse of a very specific niche group.
Oh, this sucks. I can't jack off to this.
Mion tried to threaten Yoshimura into stopping, but that wasn't the right call, as he decided to forgo any mercy and moved the filth right into her throat and held it there. Thankfully, Rika and the officers came back just in the nick of time. They took away Yoshimura while Rika and Mion embraced in a really touching scene, if you ignore Mion's dialogue about her saying that she had maggots in her throat.
Well, at least they're not in her scrotum.
However, as they were embracing, Yoshimura and Tonegawa had been ejected, and it seemed like the real antagonists were arriving. After calming down from her traumatic ordeal, Rika, out of nowhere, asked why exactly did Mion become friends with her in the first place. Naturally, she continued with her thirsty lesbian routine, but when pressed for an honest answer, Mion did clarify by explaining that she kinda saw a little bit of her old self in Rika. Often alone and stuck in an endless cycle of self-doubt, thus she approached her not really out of pity, but because she thought she found a kindred spirit in her. This brought the usually stoic Rika to tears, who then told her friend she needed to run away along with her necklace, which as it turned out seemed to contain her real medicine. However, it was a little too late as the final participants had arrived on stage. Along with the previous investigators, there was also now this wavy-haired dude and this lady who kind of looks like Rena from the first episode of Kai and the Irie lookalike from earlier. However, since they don't refer to him as the director and he doesn't appear to have a maid fetish, I'll stick to calling him Nita. Anyway, they explained that they were from the Ministry of Health and that their research had turned up something interesting. Oyashiro-sama was indeed real. To be more precise, they had found the actual cause of the deity's so-called curse. A curse that Yoshimura had no actual control over. In fact, he had likely never killed anyone, as he was indeed just a freelance reporter, as the agents had actually made up the story of the serial killer to scare off any outsiders like him and the construction workers. As for the actual cause of the curse, they were ants.
So, like, are we talking Pixar, DreamWorks, or whoever made the ant bully?
These Hinamizawa ants, as they called them, real creative name there guys, could only live in the environment produced by the village, and had the ability to enter and infest the human brain, which, yeah, ew, and apparently even thinking about them gives them grooves to crawl into, and
let's just move on to the next page before we all lose our lunches. Come on, swipe!
After Mion somehow forgot the names of the bugs.
Yeah, it's just so easy to forget something named after your hometown. Come on, pay attention, Mion.
Takano went on to explain how the ants tended to be benign and even symbiotic with their hosts.
You are making us look bad.
No, I am not.
As long as they were in close enough proximity of a certain member of their species. Yes, much like the common ant, there was a queen among them. If the ants were ever too far away from their queen, they would start to go wild and attack the host brains, resulting in the Oyashiro-sama hallucinations and other symptoms like violent outbursts and eventually, you know what. The exact patterns and effects the ants had on their hosts seemed to vary from person to person, with some showing immediate effects after leaving Hinamizawa, while others experienced absolutely nothing after leaving the village for years. Obviously, the construction workers and Mion fell into the former, but Mion did have the advantage of having the host of the queen ant being right next to her.
I am shocked. Shocked. Well, not that shocked.
This of course explained why she and Arakawa always had headaches whenever Rika left. As such, the young lady was probably the most vital member of their little town, as without her and the queen, Hinamizawa would basically become the Japanese version of The Walking Dead. Thus, the ministry had to ensure the survival of the queen by preventing the construction of the dam, as should the ants ever lose their natural environment, then the queen would likely be the first to die and all of the remaining ants would go to town on their hosts. And there was also a much more immediate issue they had to take care of. having been born with a weaker constitution, Rika's body was simply incapable of sustaining the queen. Within a few years, she would likely die because of it, thus they needed to transfer it to a new host, and with one dramatic finger point later.
See, that Detective Conan reference from last time came full circle. That is, unless you want to make this a Phoenix Wright reference.
Mion was revealed as the candidate. And they needed to work fast as obviously the ants in her were starting to go wild due to their little vacation to Tokyo.
So remember kids, the most important lesson to take away from this manga is going to the mouse land is bad for your health. Sad to say that's actually kind of true.
We then moved on to my personal favorite twist of this little manga. As it turned out, Yoshimura did absolutely nothing to Mion. He in fact actually tried to help her, but the psychosis brought upon by the ants had driven her to see things in a very different light. And of course, by extension, this likely means most of what Arakawa saw and heard probably wasn't real either.
I absolutely love twists like this here and in the criminally underrated Oculus.
As I said before, the most basic form of horror is the unknown, and what could be more unknown than the human psyche itself? Often, it's hard enough for some people to keep a firm grasp on reality on their own, but when you throw in either the paranormal, or in this case, ants, then that loss of reality can feel even more damning.
I also really like this from a general storytelling standpoint, as it does force the viewer or reader to look at it twice.
Looking back on it, there are subtle hints that Yoshimura was being totally sincere and not trying to force either Mion or Arakawa to scratch their throats out. In particular, this one scene where Mion was on her knees and yet he's not making a particularly evil face and more of a face that just says, okay, what the hell's wrong with this chick? It's not surprising that this twist would be used throughout a good chunk of the main line series, making for some of its best scenes. Obviously, Mio needed Rika by her side as her tether to reality both in the physical and literal sense. However, to truly ensure both girls' safety, they needed to go through with the transplant surgery. Or at least that's what the ministry said, as Rika knew they couldn't be trusted as a member herself. Yeah, as you can surmise, the reason Rika invited Mion out and even chose her clothes for her was all a part of a very elaborate setup. It was actually quite clever as they took advantage of Mion's well-known desires to move to the big city. Utilizing a lookalike, they made it seem as though she was running away from home, all the while leaving behind tons and tons of evidence that would back up such a story, from security camera footage to eyewitness testimonies from a train conductor and a policeman.
On a side note, I do wonder, should we consider this girl to be the prototype Shion?
But yeah, the guys from the government were using ultra shady tactics to kidnap this girl.
So yeah, surprise, surprise, you can't trust the government.
That's crazy. The government doesn't lie to people.
Shut up.
With the cat out of the bag, Nita just went into full-on Dr. West mode and said that they were only interested in her brain. He elaborated further by pointing out how everything from her original meeting with Rika was predetermined. However, even if it was all staged, Rika did legitimately become friends with her and wanted to protect her from them now. Nita countered by promising that they would do everything in their power to help Mion.
Yeah, dude, you do realize you just did an overly hammy villain declaration, right? I'm pretty sure Mion's not gonna believe a word you say now.
Takano could actually read between the lines and just figured they should use brute force. Out of desperation, Rika took her best friend hostage at knife point, but really, she was doing it because she wanted to do anything to ensure the happiness of her friend, as she herself had already gone through a hell of being a guinea pig while infected with a bug that was slowly eating away at her. And while she did indeed see her as nothing more than a get out of jail free card at first, the time they spent together changed all of that. A feeling that was mutual even with the girl she was holding at knife point. Realizing that they didn't have many options, Mio suggested that they just give up, but Rika again pointed out that they couldn't be trusted. After all, why weren't they showing any ailments in spite of having been in Hinamizawa for an extended period? Well, the answer was simple. They had already developed a cure and just wanted Mion to further their research, which involved the UN and all that conspiracy cliche stuff. Yeah, I'll admit, this part of the manga is a little long-winded. It did get back on track quickly, as the ministry decided they could just kill Rika, as the queen inside of her would live for an additional 12 hours, which they could use to perform the transfer. And thus, a certain plot point that would be seen a lot in the main series began here. Mion of course tried to save her friend, but the gunshot wound was fatal. With the main threat seemingly neutralized, one of the agents approached Mion, but maybe you should take some more precautions when approaching an emotionally scarred teenager who's just within arm's reach of a knife, just saying.
Now this, I really have to apologize. I can't show you more because it is awesome, but I'll try my best.
So, after piercing the throat of the first agent, the second one tried to shoot Mion, but she used the corpse of the first guy as a meat shield. And after he ran out of bullets, she used the first guy's gun to take him out.
Yes, the cute little anime girl just turned into freaking Rambo. Man, I love this series.
So, after literally blowing the guy's brains out, that only left 3 unarmed scientists.
And of course, being a good girl, she put down all of her weapons and tried to work things out diplomatically. Yeah, just kidding. She slaughtered a lot of them.
She started with Nita, giving him a wicked headbutt that broke his glasses in the process.
But no worries. I don't think he'll ever need glasses again, considering he didn't have eyes anymore thanks to Mion.
And after taking out the remaining 2, Mion was left as the last survivor of this whole ordeal. However, it was a rather hollow victory as her friend was still lying down on the wet pavement, not breathing or moving. All seemed lost until a voice spoke to her, which was, Yoshimura?
Is this place suddenly recycling actors at the very last minute?
No, apparently he was Oyasho-sama, and he was a benevolent god and said he would reunite the 2 friends, and then Mio woke up in the lap of a bullet-free Rika.
Have I been drinking too much of this Birkenstable?
Well, whatever. The 2 friends were reunited, and this was a touching moment, so I'll forgive them for kind of pulling a Gainax ending on us. Due to Mion's little nap, they had missed a bus, and according to Rika, they didn't have time to just sit around. And she wasn't wrong, as history almost repeated itself with Nita's group arriving at the bus stop soon after, also with less bullet holes and knife wounds in them. Thankfully, the girls had already left the bus stop, as our manga ended with the 2 promising that they would stay by each other's sides no matter what.
I was never the biggest fan of my college's theater group, but if they put on something like this, I would be the first one in line to buy tickets, because in spite of some rough areas that do need cleaning up, this is some of the best psychological horror I've ever read.
The Hinamizawa bus stop put together a really interesting mystery horror that just kept my interest throughout. I think one of its strongest traits is the fact that it is the sort of story that gives you just enough information that it's easy to follow, but other than a kind of messy exposition dump near the end of the story, we'll get to that, it never really spells everything out and just lets the reader draw their own conclusions. Heck, considering that this was originally a college play, maybe that was kind of by design to act as a sort of form of critical thinking. In some cases, the script even included multiple choice. For a character who at first seemed like a straightforward OTT antagonist, Yoshimura and the interactions involving him became an interesting enigma by the end. How much of his conversations with Mion and Arakawa were real? What was the deal with him appearing at the end? Was he actually Oyasho-sama? All of this opens up interesting avenues for discussion, which I always appreciate in a good production. Now, all that said, this story isn't perfect by any means. There are lots of moments where characters kind of repeat each other, like the discussions involving Oyasho-sama, or all the evil government stuff, which, yeah, as I said, is kind of cliche, and unfortunately, it would be used in the main series too. And while that stuff kind of took away from the intrigue involving Hinamizawa's mysteries, at least it wasn't just info dump like it was here. And while I appreciated some open-ended plot threads, there were also some clear holes, like what the heck ever happened to Tonigawa? Did they kill him off, or did they just send him back to middle management? Who knows? And of course, the whole thing about ants crawling into the brain thing is not only gross, but also very implausible, hence why it would be replaced with the Hinamizawa syndrome. Still, that does go to show that with a few touch-up, the simple college screenplay would end up becoming the basis for a great series and a company that's still going strong to this day. This particular version of the screenplay has some fantastic art that truly emphasizes the non-monetizable elements, as well as just some great faces from the subtle to whatever this is. I doubt they would have been able to pull off this sort of Rambo-style climax in a college play, as what we got here was nothing short of a Tarantino production. These characters never did catch their bus, but I hope that we can all enjoy this ride this bloody insane little series will continue to provide us with.
Next time though, it's back to the Magical Girls, as we cover yet another Precure crossover film with New stage 2. Yeah, maybe I should forgo the bus and just get a lift instead to Hinamizawa.